Now, what is the first thing that comes to mind when I mention the country Somalia? Is it poverty or violence or famine, warlords, child soldiers, drone strikes? Well, whatever your initial thoughts about the country are, chances are that they aren't good, and chances are that they are inaccurate as well. While some of all of these elements do exist in the country, the fact is that Somalia is also the home of beautiful beaches, business opportunities, and oil riches. The U.S. is becoming more and more involved in the Horn of Africa with drone strikes, covert CIA operations, even diplomacy. And one man says that it is the wrong thing to do. Michael Shank is the Director of Foreign Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and he's here to tell me why the U.S. should keep out of Somalia's affairs when it comes to the military. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, first of all, you were just in Somalia. Why were you visiting, and what did you discover?
I followed Somalia for years. I used to write on it pretty often in 2006, 2007, 2008, when we were heavily involved in airstrikes and fighting the Islamic Courts Union, backing the warlords. So I wanted to visit finally as a non-federal employee. I was a congressional staffer for many years. It would have been difficult for me to travel. Now that I'm off the hill, it's easier to go. What I found is a city, Mogadishu, I was primarily in Mogadishu, that is bustling with activity, lots of business. The West is not investing in that, and that's what I'm here to say, and that's what I've been writing about. How do we invest in the socio-economic future of the country, not primarily militaries, which is how we've seen the country.
And what is the current status of the U.S. in Somalia, and then broadening out a bit in the Horn of Africa?
Right. So primarily, as you mentioned, CIA, drone strikes, a little bit of defense support for the African Union soldiers, very little support for the Somali National Security Forces. You see the salary difference between a Somali soldier is $100 a month versus an Amazon soldier is $1,500 a month. So we need to support the government's capacity on that front. A little bit of humanitarian aid, but not much investment meeting with Somali women, Somali youth groups, not much investment in the infrastructure. Roads, bridges, clean water, sanitation, power, lighting. You know, let's figure out a sustainable plan for agricultural development rather than just giving them food, that kind of thing.
So what are some of the solutions here? What are some practical things that the U.S. can do in the short term and then in the long term to kind of change the path, the trajectory that we're already on?
Right. So a lot of people think of Somalia as a danger zone, a war zone. That's all they think of. So we have to change that perception, one. Two, I think they want a partner. They want investment. They want people to come in and invest in the, you mentioned oil riches, 100 billion barrels of oil is suspected in there. But they want to be a part of that process. They want to lead that process. They want, I mean, they're frustrated that the West sees Somalia as wanting a piece of Somalia rather than peace in Somalia. And so they're looking for partners in that process. That's what we have to change. You know, everything I saw in Somalia is very similar to what I saw in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is we're not trusting locally led processes, and that's the difference.
So are we doomed to repeat our mistakes that we made in arguably some of those countries?
Well, it looks like it, unless, and why I'm here today, and thank you for giving platform to this, we change that process. It's a fledgling government. They want to partner with us, but we have to change our mindset.
Now, I want to bring up something that you wrote for an article in CNN. You said, quote, beyond the $1.5 billion provided in the U.S. security assistance since 2009 and the myriad of airstrikes that America has rained down on Somalia, the U.S. has created an untenable aid situation where any association with the rebel group al-shabaab, however remote, is illegal. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more and what it means for Somalia?
Right. So we have a Department of Justice terrorist watch list. So anyone who's on that list, any aid group cannot associate with that group. The problem with al-shabaab is that it's very amorphous, it's very fluid. So someone might be related to someone who might be related to someone who's in al-shabaab. It makes aid very difficult. World Food Program withdrew a lot of their humanitarian aid, which ultimately led to a famine which killed 250,000 people between 2010 and 2012. We have to rethink that whole paradigm because it's preventing real socioeconomic development in the country in ways that will build allies among Somalis rather than enemies.
And let's talk about Somali perceptions and people across the Horn of Africa, perceptions of the U.S. Obviously, as you mentioned, the only thing that they really know about the U.S. is that we have functioning drones that have the capability of killing a lot of people at one time. So what else do they think about the U.S., or is that simply it?
Well, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, so they see the West as a potential entrepreneur. When I was traveling throughout the city, a lot of people were surprised to see me because there are not many white male Westerners kind of walking through Mogadishu. So, but they were certainly welcome of my time and of my investment. You know, the UN monitoring group, which has kind of given oversight over everything in Somalia, has been pretty paternalistic in nature, and that's what they're frustrated with. They don't want another parent telling, whether it's Ethiopia or Kenya or the West, US, UN, UK, telling them what to do. So they welcome participation, open arms, open doors, but it has to be one of equality.
Now, On the same kind of coin that we're talking about right now, the issue with giving so much aid to a country is that we don't exactly know all of the uses for what it is going to be. Could it potentially fall into corrupt hands that could end up fueling terrorists that hurt the U.S.?
I mean, ultimately, we need oversight of everything we do, which is why I've been very involved in oversight of even Pentagon dollars going into Afghanistan, because there's corruption there, too. So we've got to vet these organizations and root out corruption wherever it lies, whether it's in our Defense Department, our State Department, USAID, or the organizations on the ground. So yes, oversight is critical, but that's very doable. That's better than disengaging completely.
Now, obviously, the Afghanistan Inspector General would definitely agree with some of the misuses of money there. But if the U.S. doesn't get involved in the Horn of Africa, is it an argument that could be valid that possibly another country would?
Well, absolutely, and Turkey's very involved in some very positive ways in terms of socioeconomic development. So they're building the relationship. Not unlike when I was in Syria, Japan was heavily involved. We're missing opportunities to build these alliances, and al-shabaab is coming in instead. You know, they're offering a cell phone to a kid and recruiting a kid that way. Lots of kids roaming the streets of Mogadishu. Let's get them jobs.
So what is the takeaway lesson from here, very quickly?
Takeaway, we see it in Afghanistan, we see it in Pakistan, we see it in Somalia. We're only or primarily investing in military solutions and not socioeconomic, political, sustainable solutions that are locally led by the country. That's how we need to switch.
Very interesting, and we hope that you'll keep us involved in what you're doing and what you're working on, and keep us involved in the region. Michael Shank, Director of Foreign Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.